On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Healy Cipher. He's the CEO at BoomPop and the COO at Atomic. We're going to be talking about being a good and successful founder, being trusted, what makes an idea good, what makes it backable, what are the differences between successful, unsuccessful entrepreneurs. Healy's got a great background, serial entrepreneur. Excited to have you on. I appreciate your time.
Thanks. I'm here. Glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Before we start, I know I mentioned two titles, two companies. Can you tell us a little bit about BoomPop and Atomic before we dive in?
Yeah, for sure. So a little bit of background. I'm from Nebraska, small state in the center of the country you probably haven't been to, or at least haven't been to recently. And I've been kind of running and selling companies for the bulk of my career. I sold my third one back in 2019. It was this really boring company. If you ever walk into like a McDonald's or a Burger King or a Wendy's and you see one of those touchscreen kiosks, you order food, we did all of those. And after that, I was kind of trying to figure out what to do in life. My good friend Jack, who's the founder of Atomic, which is a venture studio, said, "Hey, why don't you come help me to scale the Atomic platform and join as my chief operating officer?" And I said, "Yeah, that sounds really fun." And Atomic, for a little bit of background, it's a venture fund. So it's an LPGP fund. But the big difference is we only invest in companies that we start. So none of us are kind of tried and true. Well, we're tried and true now, but none of us are career investors. We're all kind of operators in our soul. And so we're maniacal. We just want to start companies all the time and make them as big and impactful and kind of meaningful as possible. And so as I did that, one of the things that we kind of stumbled across at Atomic was this massive opportunity. And it was, we have a bunch of ways that we decide to build companies. But this big opportunity that I saw was this rise of this very boring category called events and meetings. And it turned out that the $3 trillion that was spent on facilities, so think offices, before the pandemic had shrunk to $1.3 trillion. And $1.7 trillion was looking for a new home. So we surveyed thousands of companies and said, "Hey, how are you going to spend that money?" They said 30-40% of it, we're gonna keep on our balance sheet, but 60 to 70% we're going to spend on events. And I mean client events, I mean customer summits, I mean team offsites, I mean incentive trips for my sales team, stuff like that. And so I looked around and I realized it was this massive industry that had kind of been untouched by really interesting tech in a while. And there's this moment, this why now, which is thanks to the advent of things like AI, all the kind of nuances and complexity that is inherent in events, like how do you want your tables seated? And like, what's the font size of this presentation? And what's the specific needs of this user in a specific hotel room? Could all be abstracted away. And you were left with very simple decisions as a person organizing. So BoomPop is, we're an events company. We're a next-gen travel company. We focus on group travel. So all the things I mentioned. And think of it as AI-powered event planners. So you'll meet with an actual event planner. It's an actual person. They are amazing. They're the best at what they do. You have a whole software suite of tools you will use to create your website, create your itinerary, talk to your guests, but it's all AI powered. So it's fast and easy. We're about 20 months into this. We're doing something like 27,000 hotel rooms a year right now.
Wow. That's pretty sizable. And I was actually noting you mentioned industries that are not flashy. Obviously, I have been into McDonald's and seen those kiosks. I've seen them in Europe. I've seen them here. They're everywhere. And you think about ideas that are not sexy sometimes and are serving undervalued functions, use cases. And I guess this episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about what makes a good founder. And I guess maybe what we'll start off with is the idea, right? So I actually personally believe, a lot of people are like, it's about the jockey. It's about what the jockey. And I'm like, well, I think so, but I also think it's the race. I think it's the jockey and the race combined is where success hits. I guess when you're looking at this, you've had multiple exits. You're seeing this on a from ground basis. Is the entrepreneur and the opportunity intersection vital, or is one weighted more or less?
I will tell you that broadly speaking, success of a company is going to be 95% founder and execution. But that remaining 5%, it's a binary. So for example, Travis, the kind of famous CEO of Uber, was working on a pretty shitty company before Uber. Like it wasn't good. And when he was given the opportunity to take over as CEO of Uber, he brought his team over and you could see the difference. It's just like a wild, wild difference. So it's a long way of saying that the team matters most, but if you had to take the same team and put them on 5 different ideas, the idea really matters and can be the difference between, like an okay outcome, or maybe they just like landed the plane, to a multi-billion-dollar company of enduring meaning and value.
And I guess the follow-up question to that is,
What's a good idea?
You guys at Atomic are seeing this. And this is the hardest part before we dive into the founder side, is when you see an idea, and I think founders have to grapple with this all the time, is they have an idea, the idea sounds great to them. How can you start seeing the trees of the forest of, is this idea viable? Does it have legs? And obviously you don't want to get high on your own supply. You mentioned for Boom Pop, you guys went out, did a lot of market research, you surveyed companies. That is fantastic. I don't know if everyone does that, but outside of that, how do you ascertain if you have actually a good idea, or an idea that you're like, you know what, it might be backable, or it might be an idea that could work?
Yeah. So I'll be a little careful here because Atomic has this very proprietary way of kind of determining if something is VC backable or not. But I'll give you some generalizations I think will still be hopefully useful. The first is, there's a pretty big difference between a VC backable idea and a lifestyle business. And I want to explain the difference. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's important when you are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur to understand the incentive structure of general partners of VC funds. They subscribe to this belief that is called the power law of returns, which is true, which is if they invest in 100 companies, one of them, if they're lucky, will be Facebook or Snowflake or PayPal or Square, and it'll produce so many returns, it'll return that fund many times over, and it'll make their career. And by the way, will produce more returns than every other investment in that same portfolio. Now, the second best investment, will be nothing close to the very best one, but still it will produce more than the rest, and so on. The punchline being 80% of the portfolio, and I'm being a little drastic here, but a decent portion of their portfolio, they expect will be zeros, donuts. And so when they're investing, if you say, hey, I've got this profitable business that can grow 30% year over year compounding for the next 10 years, they won't invest in you. And the reason is they need home runs. That's how the whole market works. And so it was hard for me to understand this on the outside until I got into VC, which is you need companies and entrepreneurs that are swinging so hard for the fences. It's okay if you're like Babe Ruth and you're also the strikeout king, because you just need one of them to be that crazy, crazy multi-billion-dollar idea. So that's something to note, is VC backable companies need to be able to be massive companies, but not just massive fast. They invest over, let's say the investing time cycle is 5 years and the total fund cycle is 10 years. When they want to go and raise their next fund, they're expected to produce returns. And so it's not just, can you make a $5 billion company? It's, can you make a $5 billion company in 6 years? That's what the asset class is all about. And so as an entrepreneur, the first thing I'd ask myself is, do I want to be a VC backable company, or do I want to build a lifestyle business? It turns out, by the way, if you own 80% of a lifestyle business that sells for $10 million, you make $8 million, where if you own 8% of a business that sells for $100 million, you still make $8 million, but the difference in those outcomes is severe, like the difficulty. So just worth thinking about that in general. Then I'd say broadly, and I'll focus on kind of, the VC backable business ideas, what makes a good idea. The first thing I care the most about is TAM. Total addressable market size. Is this massive? And there's a rough rule of thumb that it can help you determine if it's big enough. Look at whatever business model you're considering. So whatever, it's a SaaS model, it's a services model, it's a marketplace. Look at the net revenue you make. So in SaaS, that's just top line. On a marketplace, it's like your take, you're kind of like 70, 80% margin business. And ask yourself, what percentage of this market would I need to have penetrated to be at $100 million net revenue, to be at $500 million net revenue? If the answer for either of those is over 5 or 7%, it's not going to work, or it's a very small chance of working. market penetration over 5 or 7% gets really, really hard and expensive. CAC, your cost to acquire customers, tends to degrade significantly at those points. And if it's a vertical offering, so something specific, like I can't give an example, like I don't know, software for dry cleaners, that tends to be 10 to 12%. So the first thing is TAM, and then your business model. What kind of penetration do you need to get into the position you want to be? After that, you look at problems you're solving. Is it a vitamin or is it a painkiller? I think painkillers work the best. Vitamins are cut. And so what are you solving? Problems that are really burning important problems for your users. And the last thing I'll say is, and this is kind of the question of speed, is product is only half of the equation. And if you talk to someone like Mark Benioff, who kind of very famously founded Salesforce, he'll tell you that sales matters as much, if not more. And another way of saying it is distribution is equally weighted to product. If you have an amazing product, but you can't scalably get it in front of all the people that would buy that product, it doesn't matter. You're never going to make any money. And so really being confident that your channels of how you're going to get the product in the hands of customers is very, very clear, and something where you think you could grow in. Like that's kind of the rough equation. There's a lot more there, of course, that I probably shouldn't go into, but if you're just starting to think about it, one other thing I'll say is there's a great book my friend wrote. This book, it's called Problem Hunting by Brian Long. His buddy from Penn. It's a great, if you're an entrepreneur and you just want to like see how to think about VC backable businesses, think about how to start. This book is dope. I don't get any royalties on this. I just actually think it's a good book, just to be clear. Check it out. Problem Hunting by Brian Long. It's a good kind of like, it's a good company framework.
Nice. We'll have to, we'll drop a link to the book. It sounds like a good read for a lot of people out there. I actually appreciate, kind of the breakdown of what makes a viable idea that is VC backable. You mentioned the Uber example, Travis moving over, bringing his team, executing. When you start looking at entrepreneurs and then the founder hat, and actually I kind of separate them slightly, because I kind of think of one as I have the idea, the others I have to go build out the idea. The execution is crucial, right? When you're looking at execution and you're typically talking about people that might not, let's say if it's their first time, they've not really run a business, there's a lot to skill up on and actually be good at. How much of that is natural? How much of it is learnable? How much of it is trial and error?
I'd say that everyone will have kind of innate zones of geniuses. Maybe you're a salesperson, maybe you're a data cruncher, maybe you are, there's things you're naturally good at. And I think those are things you can use to your advantage. But everything, broadly speaking, is teachable. And there's these amazing shortcuts all the time, which are just books. I mean, you read books and it changes everything. I think you'll find that a lot of people are very voracious readers. And I'd say, broadly speaking, my thesis is it tends to be the most successful people are also the most curious. They sort of know how things are working, this kind of self-improvement all the time. So look, I mean, being a first-time founder is remarkably, remarkably hard. You'll hear the kind of one-off stories about like the super successful 22-year-old founder of XYZ and just like rocking it off. I'm telling you right now, they were hyper lucky, right time, right place, had insane mentors, insane belief, and they put a lot of work into that, and it was not easy. I'll also tell you that the average age of like very, very, like the most successful outcome startups, average age of CEO is late 30s, early 40s. I think it's like average IPO company is like the CEO is like 43 or something. So just as a sense of it is, you do learn over time, and there's, there is a natural pattern recognition. I think you get when you've done this long enough where things don't feel as big of an issue, you can kind of solve them. You're not spending energy on figuring it out for the first time. You're kind of noticing the pattern and solving it in the most efficient way. It's also why I think you'll find a lot of the really young founders who did very, very well hired very, very seasoned executive leaders in their team, to the point where it was like, look, if you're a really, really great founder, your job is to hire people exclusively that are way better and way smarter than you in whatever they're doing. Be scared. You should be nervous that they're so freaking good. That's how you know it's the right executive team member. They understand the business equation as well as you do, all the coefficients, and they're probably able to even find a coefficient or two in there you didn't even think of to make the business significantly better. So a long way of saying, There's a lot to learn. There's also a lot of shortcuts. And for anyone, I'm always happy to. A passion of mine is helping new founders out. So I'm always happy to kind of share thoughts and stuff too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I actually love the fact that everything is teachable. I think books. I'm an Audible person. I say I read, but that's a lie. I actually listen. So when you actually brought up a really interesting point about hiring people to supplement your skill set. As a founder, you have to sometimes inventory what you're good at, really understand your zone of genius, know who you need to bring in, because the optimal blend, it's a little bit of art science. As you're trying to take that inventory, try to understand, and as you're running full speed, mind you, 100 miles an hour, how do you go through, or what's the process of kind of inventorying, especially if you're early stage founder and you haven't done this before? You have to kind of identify some of those zones of genius and try to also understand that you don't want to extend yourself into areas that you just think you're just smart enough to handle as well.
Oh, that's a great question. Well, an easy way is just kind of, when you get up in the morning, what do you look forward to doing the most? Do you want to riff on some product designs? Do you want to open up a spreadsheet and do some forecasting? Do you want to do customer interviews? Do you want to, and do you want to go sell? Like, what do you like doing the most? That tends to be a North Star. I kind of believe your gut is a second mind, and it'll kind of lead you the right way. It's a good compass. So what do you like to do? That's probably the thing you're going to be the best at. I think that's an easy way to do it. And like, likewise, if you find like there's just tasks that you feel like, are such a drag and you don't want to do it, well, there are people who do want to do that and love doing it. I mean, there are accountants and lawyers and, actuarial scientists, people who love this stuff more than anything. And so that's what makes the world interesting, is different people like different things. So I think that's an easy way to think about it. I would say, no matter what, though, accounting is the language of business, full stop. And so if you don't have a basic understanding, I'd say look up a couple things if you're a first-time founder. One is read the book Venture Deals, and get really smart on economics and control. Understand how the economics work for a venture business, understand the control aspects of a venture business, understand the players, all that sort of stuff. Read that book. The second thing is go on YouTube, take a course. I don't care what you do. Understand how financials work. Understand the three statements. There's an income statement, which is profit and loss. There's a balance sheet, which is a snapshot, and there's cash flows. Get how those things are different and why they matter. As an early founder, all that really matters is cash flow. Honestly, who cares about the income statement? Later on, the IS is all that kind of matters. And so just like, do yourself a favor of, at the very least, get a basic understanding of finances, because that is the scoreboard. I mean, at the end of the day, you're playing a game at the highest level, and the scoreboard is it's what your finances look like.
I'm listening, and you're pulling out a book for every use case, which I think is phenomenal.
I know. I'm
thinking that bookcase is probably creaky. You can add another bookcase, but I'm also thinking, I think Healy's next business is going to be a book club. I'm just checking. I agree with you. Knowing your strengths, weaknesses, I think that's a great thing for us all to do. When you're actually in the founder's seat, one of the key jobs you have is to get people to trust you. There's different ways people approach that. How crucial is not just believing in you, but trusting you? You're talking about, making these additional hires, VCs seeing the total addressable market. There's a soft skill, there's a soft component to this that's trust building that seems crucial at the core of all of it.
It is the basic societal fabric that keeps us all working. Trust. If you don't trust it when someone puts on their turn signal, they're going to do it. It's hard to drive. If you don't trust that someone's going to stop at a red light, it's hard to, all these, trust is it turns out. Two things on this. One is, I think trust tends to be composed of three things that someone else needs to see or believe in you. And this is kind of like a Harvard Business Review belief set, but they have to believe that, one, you are authentic. So they are seeing the real you. You're not fronting, you're not pretending, you're not trying to be something you're not. That's distrustful. The second is they have to believe that you're logical. So like I can track the rational way this person is comprehending and suggesting. And the third is they have to believe that you are empathetic, that you care about me and my success. And there's ways you can, I think, recognize when you don't come across these ways and kind of fix them. There's kind of like wobbles in these things. So like, for example, if you're a salesperson and your inclination is to always I always joke that you're selling, a champagne event on a beer budget. Like if that's your vibe, people will feel like you're misrepresenting some part of yourself or the story. And so they're not going to believe in your authenticity. They're not going to really trust you that something's off. Or if, it feels like you're always kind of taking and you're trying to put your own needs first, they're not going to believe in the empathy that you really care about them. They're going to be suspicious. So there's always an angle. Or like if you just can't back up logically how you got here, or Lego block it, here's the key concepts and here's the details that got me thinking about this, and then they're not going to trust your logic. And those can be wobbles. There's kind of telltale signs. Like I'll give you one example, which is like if someone doesn't trust your empathy, it's because you in the meeting said something like, "Okay, I get it. Let's just end this meeting. I have more stuff to do." That's not an empathetic way of handling a meeting. And they're going to go, well, this person doesn't care. And so how do you like adjust these natural tendencies? In that example, you can make sure you don't show boredom. Make sure that you then revert your focus on what other people need, and by the way, like put away your phone. So there's ways to get trust. The number one way I found to have not just a meaningful conversation that builds trust, but also to have the most interesting conversations is you begin the conversation with vulnerability. It's like if I open this up and it's before the show and we were kind of chatting and I said, "Hey, Amir, like, I want to talk about last time I went to Aspen, blah, 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 oh, the runways are so short, blah, blah, blah." Like if I kind of started telling you about some flex, you're naturally going to think about, well, what's my story like that? Oh yeah, well, I went to Turkey, I don't know what a variable is like. I went to the Amangiri and it was so expensive and the Kardashians are there, like whatever it is. Where if instead I said, Amir, sorry I was a few minutes late. My son was up all night throwing up. It's so hard. I love the shit out of that guy. It's really hard when he's sick. You would say, I get it, man. I'm also a parent. I've seen that. Like it connects someone on a very real level.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that the best leaders adopt a very specific mindset that it embodies trust. Amir, if I could go into this, which is, I think, and this is Adam Grant, who I love, professor at Wharton at Penn in Philadelphia. I also wrote a bunch of great books. I'm going to talk about another book, Give and Take, which I love. It's like one of my little Bibles. He talks about, that most people, when they look at the most successful leaders, they think of kind of the typical things like hard work, talent, and ambition. But what they don't focus in on enough is on interpersonal skills, like the fact that we're all people, and that there's ways of treating people. And specifically, when you think about reciprocity models, there's kind of three. You can be a giver, you can be a matcher, or you can be a taker. Giver is like whatever you want. Taker is like maximizing what I can get from you, and extraction. And matching is what we normally do. Like, hey, you gave me $1, I give you $1. We're kind of free. And so if you look at the success pyramid, what's very, very interesting about this is givers are at the top of the success pyramid. They're also at the bottom, which is another story, but they're at the top. Because if everyone wants you to win, it's a lot easier to win. So if you are naturally generous and you give people and you're empathetic and you say, look, I'm going to win, but I'm also going to pull you up with me, that can be one of the best ways to gain trust.
I love that, and I'm also taking notes of the books you mentioned because I'm going to put them in the show notes because I think they're great. I mean, I'm actually always looking out to my Audible, so I'm gonna. I think I've not listened to Give and Take yet, so I'm gonna cue that up for next week.
It's a good one. It's a great one.
I love that. I was going to say I could keep probably diving in. I know you've got a billion things to do.
No.
I really appreciate your time. I love the viewpoints, the insights. If someone wants to reach out to you, because we just scratched the surface on some of these things and they might want to follow up on a conversation point, what is a good way of touching base with you?
Yeah. Just shoot me an email. It's healy@cypher.com. And I'll do my best to answer. My website, you can kind of submit a little query. The only caveat I'll say is I am maxed having 2 jobs and being a new dad and trying to be a good husband. Fair. So I will do my best to respond. Don't be upset if it takes me a little longer than I'd like. But yeah, I want to help.
Absolutely. No, I really appreciate it. And we'll include that email with a caveat that it might be a little delay to get back to you. So thank you very much again for being on.
Awesome, Amir.
That's it for the episode. Be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I think we covered a lot of aspects of not only what it takes to be a good founder, but also the core of that idea. What's VC backable? I mean, we covered a lot of things about trust as well. Share this with somebody else. If you're a founder or you are a leader, I think this is a very applicable show. So please share this with somebody else that might find it interesting. Like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how we're doing. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.